So I realize I'm about to go back on my word that I gave you guys a couple months ago and not addressing the pandemic, but I watched this movie last night and I really need to talk about it with you guys. So here we go. Contagion. So Contagion was directed by the one and only Steven Soderbergh, and it stars a bunch of famous people in the middle of a global pandemic. Gosh, that sentence sounds so familiar, but I just can't quite put my finger on as to why. All kidding aside. This movie follows the insanely rapid spread of this lethal airborne virus, MEV-1, that slaughters a good portion of humankind within days of first contact. And as the epidemic goes on, the worldwide medical community races to find a cure and control the panic that feels like it's spreading even faster than the virus itself. As this all goes on, ordinary people struggle to survive in a society which feels like it's slowly coming apart at the seams. God, this all just feels so... Okay. So, obviously, we're all in the middle of something like this ourselves in the form of COVID-19. And we've been dealing with this thing for the past number of months now. And yet, we're somehow still all sheltering in place months later because there's just some people that refuse to wear a mask in public. Which reminds me, you can have a cool design on it even if you want to. This is a Fiend mask. Just wear it. Pretty please? I digress. Even though this movie carries what's certainly a current issue right now, this movie was released in theaters in 2011. My question is, did Scott Z. Burns have a crystal ball in his study when he was writing this thing? Because this movie terrified me on a whole different level. Now, since the emergence of COVID-19, this movie has actually seen a resurgence in its own popularity. It's one of the most watched films on HBO Max right now. It's right at the top of, I'm sure, a lot of the population's watch list. But I actually watched this movie on Blu-ray, and I actually found this on the shelf of one of my favorite record stores that I go to locally for collecting. It's a great, great place. I found this on the shelf, and a lot of people have been telling me that I needed to watch this movie, so I picked it up, and man, first thing I gotta say is the performances in this movie are all outstanding. Matt Damon, phenomenal. He's basically the everyman of this ensemble, and I felt so much for his character. And the stuff that he goes through with his wife, played by Gwyneth Paltrow, who is also wonderful in the time she's given. Without getting into spoilers, this whole plotline is heartbreaking. But very cleverly, the screenplay still has this character find the silver linings in this situation, especially in regards to his relationship with his daughter, who I also thought was really, really good. Even though this is a large ensemble cast of a lot of famous people, I feel like Matt Damon was the heart and soul of this movie. He was magnificent as usual. Marion, who appears on the science side of the story, I felt had a very strong performance as well. Kate Winslet, oh my goodness, such an amazing performance from her. Now, once the end credits of this movie hit, I really wanted to research this movie a little bit more and go behind the scenes a little bit. And I actually discovered that Kate Winslet, in preparation for this role, went and interviewed members of the CDC in order to give her a more realistic turn in this movie. And this is key, she listened to the scientists' advice. And as predicted, the scientists' advice definitely paid off here because this was an absolutely mesmerizing and realistic turn. I completely bought her status in the CDC. She was amazing here. Speaking of scientists, Laurence Fishburne, outstanding work here. I would go as far as to say as this is one of his best performances. I love him in Ehle in The Bee. I love him in The Matrix, and I loved him here. He pretty much plays the head of the CDC. He collaborates closely with Kate Winslet's character, as well as Walter White himself, Bryan Cranston, also great in the movie. Fishburne has this very ensuring, empathetic presence, enough for me to trust this character in this situation. In a situation like this, he definitely has the proper reassurance. I think all the acting is absolutely stellar from everyone involved. But there's one more actor that I haven't mentioned yet that I'd like to go in more depth about, and that's Jude Law. In this movie, Jude Law basically plays this internet blogger. He tries turning this whole pandemic in this movie into a political issue, mainly to use as clickbait for his website. Now, when this movie first came out, the late great Roger Ebert, may he rest in peace, in his review for this movie, one of his main criticisms was that Jude Law's character didn't exactly fit in this storyline. And at first, I honestly kind of disagreed with him, because as unfortunate as it is to say, there are tons of people right now who are just like Jude Law in this movie, making this whole thing a political issue when it really doesn't need to be. But then that's when it hit me, really. The pandemic in Contagion was not a political agenda either. So in a sense, yeah, I do agree with Roger Ebert. Jude Law's character does not fit in this story at all. This is merely a scientific narrative. The main antagonist of this movie is still the pandemic at large, and the virus itself. I don't know, guys. This... Even though Jude Law, I think, is a terrific actor, and everything he touches pretty much turns to gold, this character didn't need to be there. He was just there to basically stir the pot. This is a scientific narrative, and he's not listening to the science, and it's... Again, I digress. I apologize. Yeah, can you guys tell I'm really frustrated by this whole thing right now? But getting back to the review, on the technical side, Soderbergh's direction is very good. I loved Ocean's 11. It's one of the best remakes ever, in my opinion. Even his most recent film, Logan Lucky, which I got a chance to see in theaters a couple years back, I loved that film too. And this I found to be no exception. I think it's brilliantly helmed. It's a well-shot movie. It looks very gritty. It looks very grim. I think Soderbergh always gets the tone just right with his movies. The biggest praise that I can give the technical side of this movie is actually the screenplay. Scott Z. Burns must secretly be Nostradamus or something. But in all seriousness, I was kind of worried going into this movie about all these intertwining stories and how they would connect together. I thought it'd be kind of jumbled. But again, that's kind of the world we're living in right now. All these intertwining stories coming together to create one cohesive narrative. I thought Burns did a great job writing this movie. Now, Contagion is a very well-crafted film. If I were to nitpick about it, I would basically say that the musical score, just the choice of the musical score didn't exactly fit with me. It didn't exactly feel like global pandemic music, if that makes sense. It felt very techno, very computerized, very Mr. Robot, and not so much finding the cure for a virus. I don't know, it just didn't sit well with me personally. Also, on first watch, the ending didn't exactly make sense to me in terms of chronologically why they would show that at the end, but just on a simple rewind of my remote control, I was looking at it and I was like, that ending is freaking genius. Because all in all, Contagion is a warning tale, and that ending proves it. But overall, I feel like this movie is a very important one for us all to watch right now. It's strange because, like I said, this movie came out 9 years ago. This is a weird time in our history. This whole situation is unprecedented. We've never seen anything like this before. I hope to God we never see anything like this ever again. And I feel like through this whole thing, Contagion has turned into a modern American classic. I'm gonna give this movie an A-. Now, I will say this movie would have been graded higher if I were to see myself rewatching it at some point down the line. Even though it's a very well-crafted movie, it's very grim, it's very tense, it feels very down to earth right now especially, and it'll scare the living piss out of some. So just be forewarned before you go into it. But like I said, I do think this is a very well-crafted film, very important for our times, definitely. I think it's at least worth a watch. It's on HBO Max right now. I bought the Blu-ray, so it's pretty much widely available right now. It's really easy to find. But what do you guys think of Contagion? I would like to know in the comments section down below. And be sure to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and feel free to hit that subscribe button down below as hard as you possibly can on your way out. Guys, thank you so much as always for watching this video and supporting the channel. Before I go, I'd like to end this video on a positive note. This is your daily reminder, guys. COVID-19 is temporary. We will get through this eventually. United we stand, guaranteed. Thank you so much again for tuning in. Please stay safe. Wear your masks out in public. And with all that being said, Back Talk, commence. With that,